This oral history of museum computing is provided by Norbert Kanter and was recorded on the 30th of April 2021 by Paul Marty and Kathy Jones.
Okay, I start with my little story, and I actually will take you really back in time and start a little bit. Probably it's interesting or not how I started in the sector, and so I have to go back in time 30 years. Sorry for that. um, at that time, I lived in Bonn in the Rhineland, also known as the former capital of Germany. And I just finished my university degree in art history. But at that time, I already was, interested in computers and stuff. And I wrote my thesis on an Atari computer, stuff like that. So I managed to get like an internship at a little company in Bonn who did at that time quite unusual collection management software. And after 1 year, there was a job advertisement coming up for somebody called IT coordinator for a new cultural institution in Bonn. So something nowadays you would call it CTO. So I applied for that and I got the job. Um, and I will go back to 1990, but the real story I want to tell you is a little bit about the somehow strange process how we came up with the first web design for this very institution. And this, of course, was not 99, it was in 96 then. And about the very, very unusual defining factors which influence this web design, I will tell you a little bit later about. And those defining factors were the name of the institution and a font. And the name of institution where I started working some years before was, now sit back and relax, Kunst- und Ausstellungshalle der Bundesrepublik Deutschland. So in German, including the blanks, it's 56 characters. And even if you look at the translation, Federal Art and Exhibition Hall of Germany, it's still, I think, 42 characters. I counted it before. So it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for PR, it's a nightmare for designers, but that was the name of the institution. The institution itself actually was not a museum. It was a new institution, a federal institution, which is quite unusual in Germany, but it was a space just for changing exhibitions, traveling exhibitions. And we showed up to 10, 12 exhibitions every year. It was a huge space. I think 6,000 square meters galleries, 8,000 square meters roof garden, outside facilities. So very, very nice new institution. And with a quite iconic design. So when I started my job in 1990, um, we were a team of 5 people, the director, the assistant, me, 2 more. And we had our offices in containers on the construction site because the building was not ready yet. And the opening finally was in 92. And just for you, nobody else might be able to see it. This is the really, really nice and iconic building we opened in 92. So really super nice place to work at. And so the name, I will come back to the problem with the name. The other defining factor, the font. One of the first things when I started to work at this institution was I was tasked to buy a computer namely a Macintosh 2 FX. Unbelievable expensive. I think it was like more than 20,000 German marks at that point. And the reason why we needed that was we hired a famous London-based graphic designer named Neville Brody. And he was tasked with developing, exactly, developing the guiding system, the signage system, and a specific new corporate font for the Kunsthalle. For the sake of time, I will call it just Kunsthalle, not the long name. And so that was like, for me, just coming out from university, it was like a crazy thing to spend so much money on the computer. But anyway, it was used to prepare all the invitations, the folders, all the necessary print graphic work we needed for the whole building. And then I will skip some years. So we have this font and we have this unfortunate name of the institution. Around 95, I went to a number of meetings in Germany from, all the big players, America Online, CompuServe, T-Online, because we thought, okay, there's something happening. We have to think about bringing our institution online somehow. So at that time, these were all proprietary solutions, AOL, CompuServe, and stuff like that. It was the time of Netscape, and the screen resolution was probably 640 by 480 and stuff like that. So in the end, we didn't run with any of those providers. We said, okay, we will build a website on the World Wide Web. And we hired a design agency. I think it was like beginning of 96. And we set up a very, very nice team of 3 people from the design agency, 3 people in-house. By that time, we were nearly 100 employees. So we grew, obviously, in the years before. And we thought about the website design. Just as a reference to the nice Macintosh 2 back from the beginning of the 90s. In 96, I actually bought a web server, and it sat for years in my office on my desk, and it was a Silicon Graphics WebForce Indie, another iconic machine from that time. I don't know. It's in the rubbish, I think, I guess, by now. And so now about the website design. This was really super, super interesting. Nobody talked about agile development back then, but we spent some months in this team to think about it. We thought, okay, we have art, we do exhibitions, we have to have images on the homepage in the website and everywhere. And we also, from the very beginning, said we want to use this font because it was everywhere. It was on site in the museum. It was on all the print material. We wanted to use that. And let me see what's next. So we went to a number of iterations, and what happened from one to the other is the whole thing got reduced with every step. We got rid of the images. We got rid of other elements on the home page. And we ended up with a white page and black font. And that was it. So you have seen the building, which is quite iconic, and we wanted to do something outstanding and iconic on the web as well, which nobody has done before, which has a unique look and feel. And in the end, it was just this font we used on a white page. It was basically the exact opposite what is happening nowadays with websites. Nowadays, you have the huge images and then the burger menu, and that's it. So we had no images, I mean, on the homepage, on the landing page. And we constructed the homepage from the menu items. We said exhibitions, general information, and calendar. These are our main areas for now. And then some smaller menu items in the footer. And then when we decided to do that, we had to deal with the name, Kunst- und Ausstellungshalle der Bundesrepublik Deutschland, like 12 centimeters or 15 centimeters long. And this really was a problem to fit it into a proper web design somehow. So end of the story was the font size of the name of the institution was reduced to 7 point. Super, super small. It was basically, if you were short-sighted, it looked like just a black line and not a name. And then the big things, the exhibitions, calendar, information, we blew it up to 70 point. And then below that, there was a small 7-point menu as well. And this was the result. I still have a mouse pad. So this, and of course you can please go on the Internet Archive on the Wayback Machine, because it's actually fun. For one of the poor designer guys, this was a horrible, horrible decision, because I remember probably a week he spent in front of the computer using Photoshop, typing in the whole alphabet in all the different sizes we needed it, and then cropped the single digits and saved them as a GIF. Because we wanted in certain areas, nowadays you would say that the website is responsive to line break at every single digit, like you can see on the mouse pad here. So if you expanded the browser, all those would, like, flip to the next line and stuff like that. So we definitely wanted to have this nice effect. So it was kind of a responsive design, but by accident, let's say. It was a really design decision. And the other really, really nice effect, and to some it was like horrible and others liked it, the calendar page. The calendar page, when you clicked on that, you came to the month, the current month, and the next 2 months, I think. And if you wanted to select a certain specific date to see which exhibition is up there, which events were up there, you had to click on the date. But the dates, we didn't give like 31st, 3/1. We actually wrote 31st in all the little characters of the corporate font of the Kunsthalle. Today, I would say it's a really fun and nice effect. Because if you clicked you landed on the homepage, you clicked on calendar, the calendar page opened, but there were like 400 little GIFs needed to be loaded. So, and then maybe all the E's were loaded first and appeared on the screen in random places, and then all the A's, and then all the I's and the M's. So it was like a piece of art. Nowadays you would, sell it as an NTF and a piece of art. But it's the time of dial-up modems and 56K connections if you were lucky. So it was annoying to some people, to be honest, but we were kind of relentless. We wanted to have it that way. So that was the quite bold idea we had. We wanted to have it unique. We wanted to have it, visible as a face of the institution. And we were sure in the end that the management and the director would say, "Are you crazy? What are you doing here? Go back, start again." But to our surprise, everybody loved it inside the institution. So we went online, I think end of 96 with the web page. And we received a lot of feedback. There were not so many museums online or cultural institutions in Germany back then. We got a lot of recognition. Very much of it was very, very positive. The rest was sometimes very, very negative. So it was, and I was pleased with that. It was not average. It was either people loved it or people hated it, and I'm totally fine with that. During the next years, it was the time where people published books about web design. And I don't know if you have ever seen it. This was a Dutch editor, website graphics, best of global site design. It was in 97, and we got inside the book with our website. I still love books about web design. Nobody does it anymore, unfortunately. But it's a kind of an archive as well. So we got a number of awards here and there, and there's one more story I wanted to tell you. Have you ever heard in the United States about Milia? At that time, it was a huge yearly multimedia convention in Cannes, in south of France, where the film festival is. So it was a huge thing back then, like probably 7,000 attendees, thousands of companies present, nearly 800 or 1,000 exhibitors. So, and part of Milia was an award they gave in different categories. So we entered the procedure, we got a nomination for the Milia d'Or, what they called it in 98, which was super exciting. Because it was not like a multimedia fair or like a museum conference. It was a really glamorous thing in Cannes with, lots of events and parties. And I had to present the website for 1 hour in front of a jury live. And the funny thing was the president of the jury was Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He was also in the multimedia business at that time, so that's why he popped up there. I was super nervous. It was super exciting. Unfortunately, we didn't win in our category. We lost against, I think, it was a website it was the Amnesty International Refugee Campaign, which funny enough was in the same category. So anyway, but it was big, big fun. And finally, the website lived until 2000, and then I left the Kunsthalle back then, and then the first redesign came along. So it was really, really a fun time with little limitations, to be honest, by the medium. I mean, whatever was possible, but also by the management or director. And I'm not sure if I convey it properly with the examples I gave. Um, I think looking back so many years, it's has been an unbelievable privilege to live during that time in an institution and be tasked with bringing them online and working in the digital area. I think it's nothing like today. It was, more interesting, more fun, more difficult, more complicated, but more rewarding as well. That's my impression if I compare it to what happens in the museum digital sector nowadays. And I want to make a reference to Larry Friedlander. I don't know if you remember, he gave a keynote speech in 2013 at the MW in Portland, which was called "The Digital Tail is Wagging the Museum Body." And I was super impressed by this speech, and I love it still. And he used a number of buzzwords or keywords, which I think explain a little bit the differences between web design back then and web design nowadays. I think back then, and I'm going to use some of those words, it was risky, it was surprising, people were bold, often things were unique, sometimes it was provoking, like our calendar page with the slowly popping up characters, something like that. And it was fun. And of course, there was a lot of bad web design as well, not to talk about that. And if I compare it to today, and I'm playing the devil's advocate here a little bit, I think today it's risk averse, it's predictable, 100% predictable, it's streamlined, it's too often mediocre, it's compliant and boring. Because, everybody thinks there is best practice, we have to have it, we have to do it like that, because everybody else does it like that. So every other museum website looks like the next whatever grocery website, and because everybody uses the same CMSs, etc., etc. So I really mourn the loss of all the attitudes we had in the 90s, in the really early days.
I'll just jump in and say, this is a theme that I've seen more and more at MW and MCN conferences over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years. We were talking with Seb Chan not too long ago, and he kind of put the
Yeah,
turning point at about 2012 is when he puts his finger on it. And that's about when I was really starting to notice it too. I would almost call it a kind of disillusionment among the technology field for exactly the reason that you say. There was a time period when this was exciting and new and people took risks. And now you've got a board of directors. The last thing they want you to do is take risks.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's about having, I don't know if you can say this, the balls to do to do something bold and different, and even if it gets more complicated. I mean, this was one of the points of Larry Friedlander back then. If you present things in so easy digestible chunks, it's not interesting. People will not learn from the easy digesting chunks. They will learn and take something away from things which make them think, which are a little bit more complicated. And that's I think one of the traps many cultural institutions fall in nowadays.
I've talked to, say, like some museum social media managers who've told me much the same stuff, where the way I hear it from them is when I started in this job, it was all how can we engage our audiences using all these new tools. But what it turned into is why did your retweet numbers go down over the last quarter? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And it's and the, let's say, the notion of speed is something to consider also, probably if you teach about media history. Back then, speed was always a problem, but okay, it was like that. Now, nobody talks about speed anymore, but everybody expects everything to be there within a fraction of a second, not displayed on the web page, but the information found they are looking for. So the speed is like a crazy thing nowadays in media, in social media, everywhere.
So, what about your experience with interactives and creating multimedia?
Oh, another, you know, a rather sad story. I think 2, 3 years ago, Harald Krämer and Peter Samis and I gave a workshop at MW, and we, from our vast archives, we selected like 15 CD-ROM productions from the 90s and actually revived them, which was really complicated. So, having a virtual machine with Windows 95 on it and stuff like that in order to get it running, but we made it. But there was like literally no interest in it. So we had like 3 people sitting in the half-day workshop, which is, I mean, we had fun anyway. It was a good thing. I think there you can do beautiful things with little money and little technology. You can do incredible stupid things with millions of dollars. So I think, I mean, but this is, like common knowledge and nothing, special I came up with. I think it might go back to social interaction and just talking to people instead of trying to convey things through technology. It's actually something we discuss right now in our company where I'm working now. Um, how to go and create new services and platforms for the cultural sector, for museums and museum visitors, which are engaging, which are forward-looking. And in all those discussions we have between a lot of different companies and stakeholders, the voice comes up most often, just talking to people, real guided tours, audio guides, podcasts, things like that. I took it as a sign that things like Clubhouse went through the roof this year, where people just talk. Nothing is recorded, nothing is readable somewhere. It's the opposite of Twitter or Facebook. It's just talking to each other. And I hope for a renaissance for that.
Hmm.
When you talked about starting in 1990, you mentioned that they had a collections management system.
No, but before landing at the Kunsthalle for a short term, it was close to a 1 year, I worked at a company who produced a collection management system. Yes, the company still exists, but it was at that time the only professional collection management software produced in Germany, actually. And then when I boarded the Kunsthalle, we had another big project creating a new database. This was not only the Kunsthalle, it was the House of History of Germany and the German Historical Museum in Berlin. So it was a consortium of 3 big federal museums, and we were tasked over I think 2 years to find a common ground to develop a database system for exhibitions and collections, but it never happened. Nothing came out of it. And then the next time I came in touch with collection management is when I changed jobs. I left the Kunsthalle in 2000 and I started at ZCOM, where I'm still.
I'd be curious to hear, your thoughts about how collections management systems have evolved over the, because you've been watching this now for how many decades?
Yeah, that's another hour we need, probably, the history of collection management software. I mean, there was a time for many years where the requirements grew and grew towards collection management systems. So, it was not only about the inventory of your collections and scientific documentation, then it was about exhibition management, loan management, logistics, transport, depots, membership, blah, blah, blah. So archive, library. So for, I would say, about 10 years, 2000 to 2010, all the major collection management systems grew a lot in their functionality. I think we kind of reached a ceiling with that. That doesn't mean that the demands from the museum and the cultural side diminish. On the contrary, it's more and more and more digital. But now it's much more about, APIs, connecting different systems, in integrating in existing workflows, facilitating new workflows, with a whole handful or a zoo of different systems. So I think the focus shifted a little bit. Also, one thing I recognized in Europe, in the 90s, in the collection management world, it was very much about scientific documentation of your collections. And this went away in a big time, because now it's much more about the next exhibition, the next event, and managing that. And there are less and less resources and time spent by museum staff to actually improve the quality of the data, or to really dig deep into, relations and scientific things. There's one exception only, which is provenance research. And again, driven by politics. This is something which came up just in the last years, at least in Europe. Do you think it's the same picture for collection management in North America?
I think so. And what you just said about, less on data, less on the documentation, except for provenance, because we do need to keep track of that. One of the things that I've always wondered about, we have so many amazing, great, rich research files and all these institutions that have never, ever really made them into the collections management systems.
Yeah, because it was not in the best interest of the museum.
Right.
And resources.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think it's much the same here. It's like we just see the tip of the research iceberg, and we know what it is, but if you could get access to all the research files, you would know a tremendous more about it. But it seems like that almost is never going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a very good friend of mine is the director of the Pergamon Museum here in Berlin. And some years ago, he told me, if he goes down in the basements, in the depots, deep on the museum island, they still have wooden crates from archaeological campaigns 100 years ago, which have never been opened.